everybody, episode 779 of the podcast that is serving America, the Torres Sports Podcast. It is Friday, October 13th, 2023, people. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody is having a great day. Don't be spooked out. It's Friday the 13th, but Torres has your back, and we got ourselves a loaded episode of the Torres Sports Podcast. Here's what you need to know about today's show. We're going to open, Wednesday we did the look ahead to some of the big games in college football, Oregon-Washington, USC-Notre Dame. Today, we look at the rest of the Week 7 slate. Miami, UNC, LSU, Auburn, A&M-Tennessee, busy weekend in college football. And we're going to kind of rip through those 4, 5, 6 marquee games that we did not discuss. From there, I actually want to talk a little bit of college hoops. We're about 3.5, 4 weeks away from the start of the season. We're going to talk some big news at Kentucky as they finally get superstar international player Zvonimir Ivisic. We're going to discuss him. Kansas basically got a slap on the wrist from the NCAA. Surprise there. Some recruiting news. And then we will wrap with America's favorite podcast segment where Aaron was right, where Aaron was wrong. Busy show, fun show. With that said, let's not waste any more time and let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, so listen, over the last couple weeks, we've made an executive decision here at the Aaron Torres Pod. We start the look ahead process to Saturday on Wednesday's show. And we did that this week talking Oregon-Washington and USC-Notre Dame. If you missed those previews, make sure to go back and download Wednesday's show. But today I want to look at the rest of the slate because there are quite a few super marquee games in the sport this weekend. Multiple top 25 matchups, a big game between Texas A&M and Tennessee. You go on and on down the list. There is a lot at stake. So let's dive into the rest of the Week 7 slate. And again, if you missed me talking Oregon-Washington or USC-Notre Dame, you can go back to Wednesday's show to check out those previews. Let's start with a top 25 matchup in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, the Miami Hurricanes versus the North Carolina Tar Heels. And it's interesting because on the Thursday college football betting show, I kind of mentioned this, but it is worth noting. This game should be a celebration for the ACC. It's not often the ACC has a genuine top 25 matchup between really good teams that doesn't feature Clemson and Florida State, and this is exactly that. Of course, it could be a top 15 matchup if Mario Cristobal knew how to take a knee. We all saw what happened on Saturday as Miami was not able to beat Georgia Tech because Mario Cristobal did not take a knee. But I think the disappointing thing from Miami's perspective, this is a really good team that should be getting more respect and probably would be getting respect coming into this game if they had not lost to Georgia Tech in the manner that they did. Just how good is Miami? Well, I think this stat is going to blow a lot of people away, okay? Did you know that as of right now, there are a grand total of 2 teams in all of college football that are in the top 10 nationally in total offense and total defense? One is Oregon. The other one is, surprise, that team that Oregon, their former head coach, left to coach. That is the Miami Hurricanes under Mario Cristobal. And so you look at this team, top 10 offense. They have the number 1 rush offense in the ACC. So Mario Cristobal, offensive line coach, big, physical, mean, tough guy. They run the football. They're tough. Tyler Van Dyke is a really good quarterback. 12 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Unfortunately, he had 3 of them last week against Georgia Tech. But they're good on defense. They're good on offense. And this is one of the more balanced teams in the country. And I would argue is right up there with Florida State as the most balanced team in the ACC. Now, from the North Carolina perspective, I don't want to say it all falls on Drake May's shoulders because that does feel a little cliche, a little obvious, a little too on the nose, as the kids say. But he is so much of what they do. Top 15 pass offense in college football. They run the football, but not at the level that a lot of other teams do. And it's because they got a top 5 quarterback in all of, a top 5 future NFL draft pick at quarterback. Drake May on the season, it's been good. I don't know that I would describe it as great. 72% completion percentage, but just 8 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And the crazy part is 3 of those 8 touchdowns came last weekend. So it's not like he's putting up Caleb Williams numbers or Michael Penix numbers or Bo Nix numbers or Jaden Daniels numbers, whatever. He's been good. I don't know if statistically you would say that he's been like a top 10 quarterback in all of college football this year. Now, in terms of the game itself, what I will say, this is an interesting matchup. I say often on this show, and it's not like a unique saying on my perspective, but styles make fights in football from the perspective that certain teams match up well with other teams more than like, you look at, say, a undefeated team versus a one-loss team, and you think they match up perfectly, but one team has an edge as opposed to a different matchup where things are just different. Okay. And so I bring it up because this is an interesting styles make fights from the perspectives of how these two teams want to attack you on offense versus what they do well on defense. And I don't mean to nerd out. I don't mean to be X's and O's guy, because that's not who I am. But at the same time, Miami wants to run the football, as I said. North Carolina's run defense is not very good. Meanwhile, Miami, I know I just bragged, top 10 total defense. They're really good. But that pass defense is a little bit of a question. Gave up 330 yards to Texas A&M earlier in the year. And so in terms of this game, listen, I don't have a strong opinion on who's going to win. I think Miami's a little bit better, a little bit more balanced. I do think North Carolina has the better quarterback in there at home. Now, if I was betting it, and I did make this one of my official best bets, I would take the over of 57. So the over-under is set at 57. The spread is 2.5. I think this is high scoring. This feels like a 34-31 type final. I do think if I had to make a pick, it would be Miami. They're getting a lot of bad pub from last week, but they're a very good football team that probably isn't getting the credit they deserve. But more than anything, I just expect this to be high scoring, fun, back and forth. 34-31 is the final. If I had to make a pick, I would say Miami, but it isn't one that I have like a super duper strong opinion on. Let's keep it going. Let's talk about some of the other games, and let's go to a fascinating game on Saturday, the CBS game, Texas A&M-Tennessee. Tennessee, a slight home favorite, about 2.5, 3 points in the DraftKings Sportsbook. By the way, I know I'll mention it later, but again, DraftKings Sportsbook, promo code Torres, bet $5 on any game, get $200 in bonus bets when you use the code Torres. They are our partners for this football season. So Tennessee's about a 2.5 point favorite. And I just think it's fascinating what's at stake for both these teams. From the Tennessee perspective, I don't think that we really know that much about them. I mean, you look at their wins, you look at who they've played, beat a terrible Virginia team, beat South Carolina in the conference, lost at Florida, and are coming off a bye. If they win this game, listen, they're right in the thick of things in the SEC East. They're right behind Georgia. All of a sudden, that game later in the year takes on more meaning. And of course, they have some momentum going into next week against Alabama. As for Texas A&M, I've said it since Monday's show. This kind of feels like the game for Jimbo Fisher. And not like, oh, if Texas A&M loses, Jimbo Fisher is fired. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that Texas A&M disaster last year, 5-7. This year, things started out good. You start out 4-1. You start out 2-0 in SEC play, and you start to get excited for the season. Well, you lose last week to Alabama. You lose this one. You're now 4-3 going into the bye. And more importantly, you still have road games at LSU, at Ole Miss. So you're 4-3 coming out of this one. You're starting to realistically look at this season and say, we're probably talking about like 7-5-ish type year. So that's why this game is so important. And this kind of feels like this is the one, not again because Jimbo Fisher will get fired, but because are you going to have the kind of season that you wanted and that you expected coming in? Now, in terms of the game itself, what's interesting to me, I think everybody thinks of Tennessee as last year, Hendon Hooker. He should have been a Heisman Trophy finalist. He was not. But you think about last year and you think about the way that offense operated. Pass, great passing. What was the kid's name? Jalen Hyatt, I think was the kid's name. I know it was. He's now with the New York Giants. This year it's different. You know that Tennessee has the number one rush offense in the SEC. You know that Tennessee has a top 25 defense right now. And so this team that was pass, and then they would have the bad defensive game last year, had one, Tennessee fans, where you got tripped up last year. But I just bring it up because totally different team. They run the ball much better. They're playing great defense, and it is a lot less on the quarterback. Texas A&M, of course, has a great run defense. And if I had to criticize, how coaches kind of do the self-scout, the self-analyzation. If I had to criticize myself for my Monday reaction to Alabama A&M, I don't think I gave enough credit to Texas A&M for how they stopped the run. So you basically have the best run offense in the SEC against an elite run defense, and that to me is the game. Can Texas A&M make Tennessee make plays with their arm? Can they make Joe Milton, the quarterback, make plays? And can Joe Milton make them? Now, if Joe Milton looks like Jalen Milroe did last week for Alabama, then Tennessee will win this game. But if Texas A&M can push Joe Milton into mistakes in 2 SEC games, it's worth noting he's only completing about 63% of his passes. Then all of a sudden, Texas A&M has a shot on the road. Another game where I don't have a super strong opinion on who wins and who loses. Do think it is low scoring, though. Don't think Tennessee gets enough credit for their defense. And Texas A&M, like I said, probably not enough credit for how good that defense was last week against Alabama. So I would say 24-21. That kind of feels like the final score. I will not be betting anything because every time I back A&M, they make me look dumb and they make me feel sad. I'm not even an Aggie fan, and I feel like, Jimbo Fisher lets me down. We'll talk about it in Aaron Right, Aaron Wrong later, but it's just one. I think Texas A&M can win this game, but I got to see it on the road. And if Texas A&M does not win, that will not be good. Couple other results really quick before we get to some other stuff. One, I think I said results, by the way. We're talking about previews. Auburn at LSU, 11-point favorites. LSU is really interesting because LSU had won basically every home game that they played against Auburn until 2 years ago. I think they had won every game since 2000. Then they lost to Brian Harsin. That was the year Ed Orgeron got fired. But now Brian Kelly has that team, and Brian Kelly's squad is an 11-point favorite. What's interesting to me about this game is that, and again, I talked about this on the college football betting show, Hugh Freeze, the Auburn head coach, been here on the Aaron Torres pod a few times. Hugh Freeze, what's interesting about him, he'll tell you exactly how he feels about teams. He'll just be blunt and honest in the media. And I bring it up because earlier in the week, he was asked about LSU. He goes, that's the best offensive personnel I have seen in the SEC in my years in this league. Now, he admitted, I wasn't here for the Joe Burrow years. And he also admitted, I haven't seen everybody even in the league this year. Some of you guys are going to try to use this as bulletin board material. But I think his point stands up. Jaden Daniels, in my opinion, should be a Heisman Trophy candidate. He is playing out of his mind. And even though LSU is only 4-2, if Jaden Daniels was not elite, they'd be 2-4. Could have lost to Arkansas. Could have lost to Missouri last week. And if Jaden Daniels wasn't a superstar, I don't know that LSU would be even at 4-2 right now, let alone better than they are. So in terms of this game, listen, I believe in Hugh Freeze. He's recruiting really well. He did great in the portal. But there's a limitation of what you can do in one offseason. And when I look at this LSU offensive personnel, I'll leave the expertise to Hugh Freeze. But Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, over 1,300 yards receiving already, 13 touchdowns between the two of them. That's the best wide receiver core in college football I have seen. I think LSU wins somewhere in the neighborhood of like 42-21. I don't think that Auburn can move the football. Peyton Thorne, their quarterback, he is what he is. He struggled at A&M. He needs some help. That was another thing Hugh Freeze said. He's like, we drop too many passes. We don't block well enough. It's not all on the quarterback, but I'm not sure that he can get the job done. A couple other games stay in the SEC. Missouri at Kentucky. Kentucky, a small favorite in the Betfred Sports or the DraftKings Sportsbook, excuse me. Nothing really to say here. I worry about Kentucky. I know people say, oh, Torres, you're overreacting to the Mark Stoops comments. Bottom line is, I don't think that I am. I have to imagine that there are some players in the locker room that were not happy to hear, oh, Georgia's just got better players than the 85 that I got. And I do believe it's probably a distraction off the field. And Mark Stoops probably had some parents call in to his office this week and let him know that they're not very happy with him. At the same time, Missouri's coming in off a physical, emotional game. Like, it's interesting, right? Because this will be an interesting dynamic of what is the tougher way to lose? Last second when you know you could win, or when you just get your brains beat in and you're like, you know what? Screw it. Let's just move on to the next one. Missouri also potentially going to be without their star running back, Cody Schrader. The other thing is Missouri has not played well in Lexington. They've lost 4 straight in Lexington. They've played 5 games in Lexington since joining the SEC, won the first one in 2013, lost in 15, 17, 19, and 21. It is also a 7:30 Eastern game. I think Kentucky wins. No super strong opinion on that one. Couple other games outside of the SEC. How about this? Top 25 matchup. By the way, Arkansas, Alabama. Alabama's going to win. I don't know by how much, but they'll win. Top 25 matchup between UCLA and Oregon State. Think you could argue these are the 2 best defenses in the Pac-12. And because of it, I would probably just bet the under. UCLA, I don't think their game against FBS opponents have gone over 45 points all year. They're low scoring. They have a true freshman quarterback in Dante Moore. They're not going to try to get too frisky, too crazy. DJ Uiagalelei on the other side for Oregon State. He is coming off a 5-touchdown game, but that Cal defense that he faced is not very good. Oregon State probably wins, but I think it's in like the 20-10, 20-14 type range. I like the under more than I like either side. And then tonight, Friday, Colorado hosting Stanford. Colorado, a 11.5 point favorite. 11.5 point favorite for Colorado. I think they get the win. They're going into a bye. Coach Prime is not happy with the 10 p.m. Eastern, 8 local time kickoff. Coach Prime, you just got to deal with it. All right. That was my full week 7 preview. And again, if you missed any of the big games, Oregon-Washington or USC-Notre Dame, make sure to go back and download Wednesday's show. We previewed those games there. But what I want to do now, take a quick break. When we come back, we will switch gears to college basketball. Big news at Kentucky where their roster is finally finalized. Kansas. Bill Self's got more lives than a cat, baby. We'll discuss that and some big recruiting news as well. Quick break. Be right back. All right, it's time for another edition of AT's Friday Best Bets presented by our partners, DraftKings Sportsbook. Bet $5 on any game and new customers get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you use the promo code Torres. This week's best bet, we are going out to Colorado, the Colorado Buffaloes Friday night in Boulder. Colorado is an 11.5 point favorite in the DraftKings Sportsbook, and I'll be blunt, I like Colorado. 1, we got an angry Coach Prime. Coach Prime was mad at the effort on Saturday against Arizona State. Coach Prime is mad at the 10 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. local time kickoff. You know he's going to be mad. You know he's fired up. You know he wants a better effort from his team, and I think he gets it. First of all, Colorado, the very rare team that is somehow getting healthy going into a bye. We may see Travis Hunter at wide receiver. We may see Travis Hunter at cornerback. And then on top of that, Alton McCaskill, a transfer from Houston. Coach Prime has said very explicitly he wants to get him more involved at the running back position. This guy was an all-conference freshman team member 2 years ago. Beyond that, just think it is a good matchup for Colorado on both sides of the football. Stanford, no disrespect intended, but 124th nationally in total defense, more specifically, 130th in pass defense. Remember, there's only 133 teams total in FBS football. Stanford, 130th in pass defense. I think Shedeur cooks. I think we all know what time it is, baby. That is right. When Stanford has the ball, I'll be honest, this is maybe the best matchup for a young and inexperienced Colorado defense that they have seen in a while. Stanford, the second lowest scoring offense in the Pac-12. So in the end, I think going into a bye, a lot of momentum, a lot of excitement. Get through this game. You're 5-2. You've exceeded all expectations. I expect Colorado to win 42-21. That is a Colorado win and a Colorado cover. That is the AT best bet going into this Friday. Remember, our partners at DraftKings Sportsbook, an incredible offer. Bet $5 on any game, get $200 in bonus bets instantly. First-time customers when you use the code Torres. All right, everybody. I'm back. Gonna be back. I do want to switch gears. And it's interesting because it feels like we have all, and I certainly include myself, we have all been so caught up in all things college football here over the last 6, 7, 8 weeks. It's hard to believe, but we are about 4 or so weeks away from the start of college basketball season. Cannot believe that we are so close to college hoops. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll have a lot of stuff on the, the College Hoops Daily feed with Zach Kroll. I'll do some preview stuff there. We'll kind of ramp up the coverage here. And obviously at Aaron Torres Online, we'll be talking plenty of college hoops as well, writing about college hoops, all that good stuff. But there were really about 2 or 3 big pieces of news in college hoops over the last couple of days that I do want to get to here on the Aaron Torres pod. And I would argue that none was bigger than what officially, finally, mercifully happened on Thursday as the last piece of the 2023-2024 Kentucky basketball roster finally arrived on campus. The kid's name is Zvonimir Ivisic. He is a 7'2" Croatian center. And if you don't remember this story, this was kind of a wacky story that we've talked about probably about 3 or 4 times over the last couple months. So Kentucky, their roster kind of came together late in the summer. They did add Trey Mitchell, big man from West Virginia. He's kind of a hybrid 3-4. He's about 6'8", 6'9". And then they went on an overseas trip to Canada. International trip's probably the right word. They play in a tournament there, the Global Jam. They win that tournament. But the issue becomes pretty straightforward. They're 2 legitimate big guys, Aaron Bradshaw, 5-star, potential lottery pick, and Agana Onyenso, a 7-foot sophomore. Both are out with foot injuries. And so you come out of that trip feeling good. You went 4-0, all that good stuff, but you don't really have very much size on the roster. You don't know when everybody's going to come back. And then seemingly out of nowhere, in late July, we just start to hear whispers that Kentucky is not only actively recruiting a kid named Zvonimir Ivisic, but that he's probably going to commit to Kentucky. Really talented player from Croatia. He was a guy that actually declared for the NBA draft last summer, went through the process, worked out for teams, was stateside, ends up withdrawing from the NBA draft. And just about everybody in the basketball community just assumes, okay, he's going back to his overseas team. He's going to play another year overseas. Then he'll declare for the draft in 2024. Instead, we get word that Kentucky is actively recruiting him. And then I believe it was August 1st. We get word that he has officially committed to the Kentucky Wildcats, and everybody's excited. Everybody's happy. I thought it was a really cool story that this international superstar is coming to play college basketball. Well, another 2 or 3 weeks pass, not very much kind of newsworthy comes out of the Zvonimir Ivisic camp. And then it was really around the start of college football season. And I remember because we talked about it maybe in week 1 or week 2 or week 0 or whatever, we start to get word that this kid might not be admitted to the University of Kentucky. Very rare instance that I can think of, cleared by the NCAA. NCAA is like, okay, we're good. Go where you want to go. But it's actually Kentucky that says that you are not admitted to our school. And basically the sentiment around it, I think every Kentucky fan listening knows, but there was an English equivalency test. He passed one, but it was the wrong one. And so he had to take another one. And it was really about a 3, 4, 5 week window where nobody really knows what's going on with this kid. Kentucky is pretty tight-lipped. At certain points, it felt like he wasn't going to make it on time. Then you realize dates and deadlines can be extended, but is the school ever going to admit him? And then finally, about 3, 4 days ago, we finally get word that he has in fact been admitted. And then on Thursday morning, he officially shows up in John Calipari's office, taking pictures with Coach Cal. And it's just a really cool story. And I'm happy for the kid, listen, I said this at the time, you don't want to bring in a kid who can't complete the work, but it's clear he had a welcome video that was put out by Kentucky's social media team. He speaks pretty, very good English, frankly. And so it struck me that it wasn't as though he couldn't do the work. It wasn't as though that he can't speak the language, but whatever logistical hiccups that were problems, they have been resolved, and this kid is on campus. Let me say this. As we look ahead, I'll be blunt. 1, huge recruiting win for Kentucky. And 2, let me just call a spade a spade. He's a kid that bluntly Kentucky kind of needs, okay? So first of all, credit Coach Cal, right? And I know Coach Cal takes arrows from other programs, from his fan base, from whatever. Sometimes it's justified, sometimes it isn't. But this was a grind, man. I mean, because listen, just think about it. It's one thing when you're recruiting against other schools. It's one thing if there's an NCAA issue, and Coach Cal has dealt with a few of those in his career. It's yet another issue when the NCAA is hands off and says, no, we've seen everything we need to see. And it's your own school standing in your way. Again, this happens periodically, but it's generally at a Stanford or, Michigan. We had that situation with Caleb Love. I don't know that I ever remember, and maybe I'm wrong, but, a major, star recruit ever having an issue at the University of Kentucky. So for Coach Cal to be patient, to work with people behind the scenes, to get this done, to get the test taken, huge recruiting win for him against his own school and his own administration. And it obviously goes without saying, he was recruiting against other schools that were trying to convince him, hey, don't waste your time with Kentucky. They're never going to let you in. They don't care about you. Come here. We'll get you in tomorrow. Talk to a few schools that were a little familiar with the situation. And they were like, yeah, bluntly, if he becomes available, we would love to have him. We would take him, etc. And so it was a major recruiting win for Cal. You needed this guy. And to me, that last part is the important part. You really, you bluntly, you need this kid for your 2023-2024 roster. Now, to be clear, I'm not calling him a superstar. I'm not saying he's the best player. And it is important to note, he's been held up. It's now October 12th as I'm recording into October 13th. And I bring it up because, I'm not saying they need him because they need him to average 22 points and 11 rebounds per game. International kid, new home, new country, new coaching staff, new teammates. It's going to take time. And with international players, it sometimes takes even longer. I've talked to people like kind of in that Tommy Lloyd, Arizona, ecosystem that basically Tommy Lloyd's kind of the international guru. And those guys say all these guys are a little bit different. Some it clicks right away. Some it takes a little bit longer. Bluntly, some red shirt. That's obviously not the case here with Zvonimir Ivkovic. So I'm bringing it up to say it's going to be a process. It's not going to happen overnight. He's not going to be a star overnight. But to me, this is just an important body to have on this team. One, we really don't know much about the injury issues with Kentucky's front court. Now, Kentucky did have their pro day on Wednesday night. It was streamed on ESPN+. And John Calipari said that both Aaron Bradshaw and Agana Nyenso, the 2 7-footers on this roster, those guys are about 5 to 6 weeks away. And I think that's an interesting time frame. And I think it's an interesting comment from John Calipari, because is it 5-6 weeks away from being cleared? Is it 5-6 weeks away from being able to practice, from being able to play? Even in a best case scenario, you're talking about 5-6 weeks to be cleared and to be able to play. There's still going to be a ramp up. And assuming there's no holdups, even if you're back on the court in 5 or 6 weeks, I think you're talking a minimum of 2 full months before you're kind of at game speed and all that stuff. Well, we're smack dab in the middle of out of conference play 2 months from now. I mean, that's early to mid December at that point. Beyond that, I think that it's worth noting, Cal said 5 to 6 weeks, and that feels like a best case scenario for 2 7-footers with lower body injuries. We know the history, and I'm not rooting against anybody. I'm not insinuating anything. But lower body injuries on big guys generally take more time to heal. You're extra cautious. Both these guys potentially have NBA futures. I've seen each of them kind of on NBA mock draft boards over the course of the summer. And certainly, especially with Aaron Bradshaw, a guy that's a potential lottery pick. So you don't want to rush him back. And I think even on a best case scenario, you're talking about, again, probably about 2 months before they are game ready and game speed. And that is if they are on a best case scenario. And by the way, that doesn't even include the fact that Aaron Bradshaw, we've talked about it on this show with multiple prospects, but he is represented by Clutch. That's Rich Paul. Rich Paul, let's just say, kind of has a history of, maybe not moving the fastest that he can to get guys back on the court. We saw it last year with Nick Smith at Arkansas. Kentucky has had their issues with him through the years. So I'm not insinuating anything, but I think there's still a segment of Kentucky fans that think this kid might not play, Aaron Bradshaw, and that's why Ivkovic is that much more important. So this is big. This is fascinating. And again, this is just bluntly an important thing for Kentucky. I think finally, my last thought, I expect to see him a lot early. Is he ready? Is he 100%? You're playing Kansas and Hunter Dickinson the second week of the season, so it's not going to be easy. But the good news is at least he kind of plays that style that you want to play, which is 5 out. Everybody can pass, dribble, shoot. And I'll be blunt. I'm excited to watch Kentucky. I actually, the foreign tour really impressed me. I think they're going to be better than people think. I think people think, oh, Cal's going back to freshmen in this era of 5th and 6th and 7th year seniors. Memphis is still trying to get a 28-year-old eligible. And I think there's a lot of people that are down on Kentucky. I think it's going to be a really good team. Now, we'll do our SEC picks and previews later on. Tennessee is going to be good. Arkansas is going to be good. Bama is going to be good. Mississippi State, although they have some injury issues as well. The point I'm trying to make, this is big, big, big news for Kentucky. Couple other news and notes. You know, this one, I'll be blunt, I don't want to spend a ton of time on, okay? It is that we got a resolution with the Kansas FBI NCAA investigation that dates back to 2017, okay? So listen, again, I'm not going to spend much time on this because I just think everybody's kind of over this entire narrative at this point. But remember, Kansas was one of the schools that initial day, fall of 2017, FBI raids major college basketball programs. We've talked about it for literally 6 straight years now, okay? FBI says, we have your playbook. FBI says, we're coming for you. For about a 3, 4, 5, 6 day period, it felt like everybody in college basketball, I mean, the texts that I got, the DMs that I got, you know, the private messages that I got were insane. But I bring it up because since then, a lot has changed in college basketball, and all of those schools that had been investigated, all of them essentially had their you know, what's the right word? Their investigations wrapped over the last probably year or two, whether it was Louisville, Memphis, Arizona, LSU, etc. Kansas was the last one, and Kansas got their punishment, and I am air quotes for people who are not watching on YouTube. Kansas got their punishment on Wednesday afternoon. That punishment, they are hit with probation. Not totally sure what probation even means. Basically, it's like a don't do this thing again. And I will note, like, Bill Self is missing some games this year. He was pulled off the road in recruiting a few years ago, and they do have to vacate wins from the 2018 season, which includes a Final Four run, which means they have to take down a Final Four banner. Now, I understand that most people kind of get it. They get that, like, removing a Final Four banner, we were all there. We all watched it. Now, it's worth noting that year, the Final Four, Kansas got destroyed by Villanova. I was, I think, at that game. It was really bad. As a matter of fact, I was at that game. So they're vacating a Final Four loss that they probably wanted to forget anyway. But listen, I'm not going to spend too much time on this game. Silvio De Souza was the player that was not alleged, he was involved. Adidas helped get him there. That was the famous TJ Gassinola, the bagman, saying, Coach Self, you know, I've never let you down. Silvio De Souza ends up there. He was the player that was ineligible. He is now, how about this, 25 years old playing overseas. But listen, I understand people that are frustrated that Kansas got a slap on the wrist. Now, you could say taking a Final Four banner isn't a slap on the wrist, but at the same time, you know, think about just dating back 5-6 years. I mean, we've had Mike Boynton, the coach of Oklahoma State, on this show. Mike Boynton and Oklahoma State went through the traditional NCAA process. They got a 1-year NCAA tournament ban. Kansas gets a couple games, it gets probation, and Bill Self gets a couple games suspension. Now, it's worth noting, this was a little bit of a different process. Kansas, like LSU, like Louisville, like Memphis, like all these schools, they went through what was called the IARP. That was an independent investigation group that was put together kind of post-FBI. Basically, post-FBI, we kind of determined, like, hey, the NCAA probably shouldn't be investigating their own investigations. Like, they shouldn't be the judge, jury, and executioner on this. So they create this IARP, and ultimately that's why this news isn't that shocking. Because if you follow the IARP, they basically asked for what you guys and girls as fans have asked for years. Don't punish current players. Don't punish people that have nothing to do with it. So Memphis, even though they didn't fire Penny Hardaway, they didn't get a postseason ban. Arizona took a 1-year postseason ban in 2020. And so I'm going on and on. But the point is, Kansas is not going to miss the postseason. Their level 1 violations were knocked back down. And I know some of you want me to be outraged and whatever. And listen, if this was 4 or 5 years ago, I would say that the system's a sham. But once this IARP came in, we knew that the system was going to, we knew that the system was going to be different. We knew that they weren't going to hand out postseason bans. We knew that if Kansas did not fire Bill Self, that he was not going to lose his job. And so I don't know that there's a big take to be had here. I do feel bad for Oklahoma State, who went through the traditional process. They got a postseason ban. And by the way, feel bad for Arizona, because in 2020, they had an NCAA tournament team, and the school decided not to go through to self-impose a ban that year in it was 2021, excuse me. It was the post-COVID bubble year where Pac-12 teams weren't even having fans in the stands, whatever. That was the year they had a Kinjo and Tubelis and whatever. Bottom line, I don't think there's much more to add. This was expected. This was coming. I'm not surprised. I do feel bad for Oklahoma State. By the way, Bill Self, guy's got more lives than a cat, baby. But it shows Kansas. Listen, I'll give Kansas credit. They knew we have a Hall of Fame coach, probably the best coach in the sport. Aaron Torres would argue that he is. And they're like, we'll take whatever punishment. We're not firing our coach. You wonder if in hindsight, Louisville wishes they had done the same with Rick Pitino. If LSU wishes they had done the same with Will Wade. I know for a fact I have LSU fans to this day DMing me. We should have never fired Will Wade. So anyway, I could go on and on, but Kansas with the slap on the wrist, it was, but that 2018 Final Four banner is coming down. Finally, one last note in college hoops. I just want to be very brief on this, but it is interesting. We've done a few recruiting updates here over the last couple of weeks on the Aaron Torres pod. And this is interesting. AJ Dybantsa, who was the #1 sophomore in high school basketball, has reclassified to now be part of the 2025 recruiting class. So he is now the #1 ranked junior, and he'll play college basketball a year early. 6'8" forward, originally from Brockton, Massachusetts. He now plays at Prolific Prep. So look, he's almost got that Torres trajectory, right? Starts in the Northeast. He's now in California. That's basically my trajectory to a nutshell, except I'm not 6'8", and I'm not going to be a millionaire in maybe I'll be a millionaire, but I ain't going to be playing in the NBA in about 3 years from now. But this isn't surprising. He was a year old for his grade anyway. And this fast tracks his ability to graduate high school early, get to college early, get the 1 year done early, and then get to the NBA. I think from a positive note, he has said publicly in multiple interviews, my mom wants me to go to college, experience college. So it sounds as though he will be a college basketball player. Won't be going to the G League Ignite program, won't be going overseas, won't be doing any of that. And then from there, I think now his recruitment really picks up. I think it's a little early to presume anything in his recruitment, but he's very close with he was very close with the late Terrence Clark, who played at Kentucky. I think he'd love to follow that trajectory. Also, UConn, he's from Brockton, Mass, as I said, and UConn has proven with Cooper Flagg, they're not going to back down to anyone on these high profile recruits, especially guys that geographically kind of make sense. So this one is worth keeping an eye on. AJ Dybantsa is now headed to the class of 2025, where he is now the #1 ranked player in the country. All right, so what I want to do, take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to wrap America's favorite podcast segment, where Aaron was right, where Aaron was wrong. Quick break. Be right back. Thank you, everybody, for your support of the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube channel. And we do have a major announcement as major news has come to the state of Kentucky. That is right. Legal sports betting now available in Kentucky. And here is the cool part. The Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel has now partnered with DraftKings Sportsbook and the DraftKings Sportsbook app. And as a thank you to listeners of this channel, DraftKings Sportsbook has an incredible offer for all first-time customers. First-time customers, here's what you need to know. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Bet $5 on any game. You get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you use the code Torres. That's Torres, Torres. All you got to do, it's very simple. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook online. Bet $5 on any game. Get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you use the code Torres. First-time customers, take advantage of this exclusive offer. It's an incredible deal. Thank you to DraftKings. Could not be more fired up to be working with the DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. Final segment of the week. So good to be back. And I do want to go ahead and wrap, as we do every Friday, with America's favorite podcast segment, where Aaron was right, where Aaron was wrong. Yes, I stole this from my buddy Colin Cowherd. No, Colin well. And every week on his show, He does where Colin was right, where Colin was wrong. And I decided to bring it to the Aaron Torres pod for one very simple reason. It is because over the course of a week, a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, nobody loves giving out more hot sports takes than your boy Torres. Torres said this. Torres said that. You should have listened to Torres. I just never shut up. Just ask my wife. But here's the thing. While I love to celebrate the things I get right, we got to do where Aaron was right, where Aaron was wrong, because I got to take some L's sometimes too. I get a lot of stuff wrong, and we celebrate the good and the bad to end every week. Let's get to it where Aaron was right, where Aaron was wrong. Where Aaron was right. So it was about a month ago that everybody was giving up on Alabama football. They're terrible. They don't have a quarterback. And I'm not here to sit here and say that I thought it was perfect. But when everyone's throwing out these theories about a locker room revolt and is Nick Saban going to retire, I did the old Aaron Rodgers, RELAX, relax. Because what was obvious to me was that Nick Saban realized that he had a different team that I think even he thought probably 6 or 8 weeks ago in fall camp. They were going to have to rely on the run game. They were going to have to rely on Jalen Milroe's legs, and they were going to have to win games ugly. Well, fast forward, and that is exactly what they have done since that Texas loss, as they are now sitting at 6-1, or 5-1, going into week 7 and in complete control of the SEC West after the win at Texas A&M last week. It hasn't always been pretty, although Jalen Milroe is getting better. It is different than previous Alabama teams, but this Alabama team has as much potential as anybody. Again, they control the SEC West. They win out. They're going to Atlanta. They're playing Georgia probably for an SEC title. And if they win that, they're going to the college football playoff. All y'all gave up on Alabama too early. I'm not saying I ever thought it was perfect, but at the same time, I did see this pathway, I guess is the right way to say it, where Aaron was wrong. So for years, I've been trying so hard. To defend the Jimbo Fisher stuff. Maybe he's not terrible. Maybe he's not overpaid. Maybe he's going to take care of business when it matters most. And last week felt like the moment. Now, in hindsight, maybe Texas A&M didn't play as bad as I thought. Maybe they shouldn't have gone for it on 4th down. But it still goes back to what I said. It's year 6. You're at home. You're trying to fight for control of the SEC West, and it was just one little mistake after another. And so I'm not here to say that Texas A&M can't run the table. I'm not here to say they can't finish 10-2. I just don't think that I can predict or pick them to win big games anymore. Every time I do, they let me down. Every time I do, I don't even know what to say at this point. You heard my take on the A&M-Tennessee game this weekend. I have no strong opinion on it. I'll be taking the under because I think it's close and low scoring. But, man, I just cannot defend Jimbo Fisher anymore. It has been so bad. Where Aaron was right. So, listen, about a month ago, USC started out 3-4, 5-0, whatever it was. I mean, they're 6-0 now, but start 3-4-0. And you start to see this narrative of like, I think the defense is fixed. Look at them. Lincoln Riley. He knew it all along. And what did I tell you on the show? I was like, no, they didn't fix anything. They're still terrible. They're playing the worst team in the games that fixed the defense was Stanford, the worst team in the Power 5, and Nevada, maybe the worst team in all of college football. Well, fast forward, Colorado diced them and sliced them up. And last week, Arizona put up over 500 yards of total offense against them. Now, to USC's credit, there was late in the game, probably the middle of the game, they made some plays. It doesn't change the fact that this is not a championship caliber defense. I don't think they're beating Notre Dame this week. And even if they do, they're not running the table against Utah, Oregon, Washington, and UCLA, who are all on the schedule going forward. I love Lincoln Riley. I think he's brilliant, but he has got to fix that defense because they ain't winning anything this year. And I'll tell you what, when you go to the Big Ten, you aren't winning anything there either. Let's get back to it. That was where Aaron was right. Let's get to where Aaron was wrong. All right. So I just mentioned Lincoln Riley. I owe the man who replaced him at Oklahoma an apology. Brent Venables, I am sorry. Now, look, I like the Brent Venables hires when it happened at the time. And I thought Oklahoma was a little bit underrated coming into this year. But I also can't erase history. And when they got smoked by TCU and they got smoked by Texas last year, even without Dylan Gabriel, I sat there and said, I don't think Brent Venables is the guy. Maybe he's just a great coordinator because this is supposed to be a defensive guru and they have the worst defense in the Big 12. Well, fast forward, defense is much improved. This team is 6-0 going into the bye, and I don't see any scenario really where they're not playing for a Big 12 title later in the year. Even if they lose one game, they'll have the advantage over Texas, and I think we are inevitably going to get a Texas-Oklahoma rematch to go to the playoff. But credit to Brent Venables. I gave up on him after about 5 games. I said, I just don't think he's the guy. I know you're not going to fire him, but you probably got to start thinking about it. Start calling those big boosters, get that money lined up. Yeah, turns out they are just fine. Where Aaron was right. All right, so about 2 years ago, one of my favorite theories of all time, the Cowboys, do you remember 2 years ago, the Cowboys, the Dallas Cowboys, we're going to the NFL now, they lost that wild last-second game to the San Francisco 49ers in Dallas. Not last year when they lost in San Francisco, but the year before when they lost in Dallas. And I said, Mike McCarthy ain't the guy and Dak ain't the guy. And what I said at the time, I love this theory. It's one of the favorite things that I've talked about. I said, you fire Mike McCarthy today and you offer Nick Saban $25 million a year because you had all those young, talented players on rookie contracts. And I said, you really have a Super Bowl window of 2 years. You have 2 years to get the job done because then Micah Parsons is going to get paid. Trevon Diggs is going to get paid. CeeDee Lamb is going to get paid, and you're going to miss that window. Well, fast forward to last Sunday, but now we're going to rewind. They got destroyed by the 49ers, and they're not even close. I think part of it comes down to coaching, but part of it comes down to this was the window. Dak is now 30 plus. He is being paid like a superstar quarterback, and he is not a superstar quarterback. And I don't believe you can win a championship with him unless everything around him is perfect. The problem is, again, all these guys are going to get paid. You're going to continue to lose depth. You're going to continue to lose experience. You're going to continue to lose talent. I think the Cowboys Super Bowl window probably closes after this year. And as we saw on Sunday, they are nowhere close. Where Aaron was wrong. Let's stay in Dallas. Let's go back to a topic I just discussed a minute ago. So I talked about Oklahoma's win over Texas, but let me say this. The day that Texas and Oklahoma left or announced they were leaving for the SEC, I said this is program suicide for both. They are nowhere close. They are not going to be able to compete in the SEC. Well, fast forward 2 years and think about how good these teams are and where the SEC is. Now, I think most of these programs are in pretty good hands, whether it's Tennessee with Josh Heupel, Kentucky with Mark Stoops, obviously Georgia and Alabama are at an elite level. But you mean to tell me Texas and Oklahoma couldn't step into the SEC today and compete with Ole Miss, compete with A&M, compete with LSU? I think at minimum, they'd be 2 of the 4 best teams. And frankly, maybe 2 of the 3 best teams, depending on how you feel about Bam. And so you fast forward, it's going to be a different deal next year. Dylan Gabriel's going to be gone for Oklahoma. Quinn Ewers might be gone for Texas. But these 2 teams you watched on Saturday, those look like SEC teams. Size, speed, athleticism, offense, defense. I give those 2 programs credit. I did not think they would be SEC ready. They looked awesome last Saturday. Finally, let's get to 2 more where Aaron was right. Did you see what the NBA said yesterday? I guess it would have been Thursday about load management. They basically said what I've been saying on this show for years. And what's obvious from the NBA, they are trying so hard to convince these superstars that they have to play. But what I've said about load management for years is this. Load management started as a thing that the San Antonio Spurs did to rest veteran players at the end of road trips. There was no science. Doctors weren't involved. It was basically like if we're playing on a Friday in Toronto and we got a home game on Sunday in San Antonio, let's just have you skip that Friday game, get home a few days early, get your rest, get your rehab in. And so what I've said is, ever since they added load management, ever since the doctors became involved, ever since it became a science, there's no proof that it works. Zion Williamson can't stay healthy no matter how many games he misses. Kawhi Leonard, we rest him all offseason to have him ready for the playoffs, and he gets hurt in the playoffs. Well, this week, the NBA came out and said there is no proof that the science behind load management works. Listen, I should be a doctor, okay? Just go ahead and give me an honorary degree in biology or chemistry or whatever. I've been saying this for years. The NBA finally confirmed it. Finally, where Aaron was wrong, disappointing effort on Saturday night from Kentucky and from Mark Stoops. Really thought that this might be the year where they had the depth and the talent to compete at the top of the SEC. I didn't think they were beating Georgia. I don't think they were losing 51-13 either. Obviously a bummer, obviously a disappointment. Listen, everything's still ahead of you. You have Missouri this weekend. You could still finish probably second in the SEC, but that was not the effort that Kentucky fans wanted, and it was a little bit disappointing. All right, I think that's it for this episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. Thank you guys and girls for another great week of support. Really do appreciate everything you guys and girls do for this show. It's been a fun fall, and it's only getting better with college hoops right around the corner. If you're not subscribed to the show, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure to subscribe. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, closing in on 27,000 subscribers. Cannot thank you all enough for your support. And finally, DraftKings. Use the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use promo code Torres. First-time customers get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you use the code Torres. That is all for today's show. That is all for this week's shows. It is time for me to get out of here. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick. You F-head, unblock me, bro. I'll be back on Monday. New episode, Aaron Torres Podcast.